The first entry is dated the morning I realized I had been wrong about everything. Day 1, first month. I am writing this because I do not know what else to do with my hands. I have been sitting at my desk for 4 hours. I have read the same briefing document 11 times and retained nothing. My tea went cold before I touched it. Outside my office window, the city looks exactly as it did yesterday, which seems, under the circumstances, like a kind of insult. The human embassy is empty. I keep writing that sentence as if repetition will make it mean something different. The human embassy is empty. The staff withdrew overnight. All 47 personnel, including support staff, including the cultural liaison team, including Ambassador Elena Park, are gone. Their residences have been vacated. Their vehicles have been returned to the transit depot. Their files, I am told by our security office, have been either removed or destroyed according to standard diplomatic protocol. Standard diplomatic protocol. As though this were routine. As though we had been informed. As though I had not sat across a dinner table from Elena Park for 3 hours last night while she smiled at me and asked about my children. I need to set down the facts as I understand them, because I am a diplomat and facts are what I know how to work with. Fact. The human diplomatic mission has withdrawn from Vox without prior notification to the Foreign Ministry. Fact. Ambassador Elena Park attended a private dinner with me last night, during which she gave no indication that this withdrawal was imminent. Fact. She brought me a gift. I am looking at it now. It is on my desk, to the left of my communication terminal, in the place where I usually set things I need to remember to deal with. It is a small woven box, the kind made by hand in a particular district of her home city. She told me so last night. She explained it to me with what seemed like genuine pleasure, her hands turning it over so I could see the pattern on the bottom. She said she had been carrying it for 2 years, waiting for the right moment to give it. 2 years. I cannot make that fact lie flat. It keeps rising up at me from every angle. She had been carrying a gift for me for 2 years. Last night, she decided the moment had finally come. And this morning she was on a transport vessel with her entire staff, leaving Vox, leaving our solar system, leaving behind 47 years of diplomatic relations. I do not understand. I have been telling myself all morning that I do not understand, and I think I have been using that phrase as a kindness to myself, because the other possibility, that I do understand, and that what I understand is not something I am prepared to look at directly, is still too close and too bright, like a light I am not ready to turn toward. I will write more tomorrow. Tonight, I am going to file a formal inquiry with the Human Transit Authority and request an explanation through proper channels. Tonight, I am going to be a diplomat. Tonight, I am going to pretend that this is a professional problem and not whatever else it is. Day 3, first month. No response from a Human Transit Authority. This is not surprising. The Transit Authority is a bureaucratic body and does not move quickly. I have also sent a message directly to Elena's professional contact address, which is the address she has always used for our correspondence. I did not expect her to answer. I sent it anyway. I have been at work for 12 years. No, 15 years. I have been managing the human diplomatic relationship for 15 years. I was assigned to this portfolio when the previous human ambassador, a man named Davin Crisp, was finishing his tenure, and I have served under 3 human ambassadors since then, and Elena has been here for 9 of those years. 9 years. I have been trying to count. How many times did we meet? The formal bilateral sessions, the cultural events, the informal lunches that I scheduled when I wanted to move something through her office without the friction of a full diplomatic process, because she was always more responsive in informal settings, always more willing to find practical paths forward. Hundreds of meetings, certainly more than 100, possibly many more. I know quite a lot of information about the human mission on Vox. I know their staffing levels and their budget allocations and their official policy positions. I know Elena's professional history, where she trained, which postings she held before Vox, the commendations she received from her government. I am trying now, sitting here 11 at night with the woven box still on my desk, to list the things I know about Elena Park the person. She has a sister. I know this because Elena mentioned it once, during a reception, when a colleague of mine made a joke about siblings, and Elena smiled and said she had a sister who would have appreciated that. I did not ask about the sister. I moved the conversation along. She grew up near the coast. I know this because when I offered her a tour of our coastal preservation district, this was during her second year, I was trying to build goodwill ahead of a difficult policy negotiation. She said that coastal landscapes made her feel at home. I remember thinking that was useful context for the negotiation. I did not ask her anything else about it. She prefers her tea without the sweet syrup our servers typically add. I know this because she mentioned it politely the third or fourth time we had tea together, apologizing for the inconvenience of asking, and after that I always made sure to note in the room arrangement requests. I thought of this as attentiveness. I thought of it as evidence of how well I understood her. A sister, a coast, tea without syrup. After 9 years, that is what I can list. Day 7, first month. The official inquiry from the Foreign Ministry has now been sent through 3 separate channels. We have received one brief response from the Human Government's Interstellar Affairs Office, which stated only that the withdrawal was conducted in accordance with established protocol and that further communications would be directed to the relevant intergovernmental bodies. My superior, Deputy Minister Vore, called me into his office this morning. He wanted to know if I had any advanced knowledge of the withdrawal. I told him I did not. He looked at me for a long moment. Vore has a way of looking at you that makes you feel he is reading text you cannot see, and then he said that he found it unusual that the ambassador had chosen to have dinner with me the night of the withdrawal, and that he hoped I would reflect carefully on whether there was anything from that dinner that might be relevant to our assessment of the situation. I said I would reflect carefully. I have been reflecting carefully. What I keep returning to is not anything Elena said. It is the way she listened. Elena has always been an exceptional listener. This is something I have noted in my professional assessments of her. I have cited it as one of the qualities that made her effective. She listened with her whole body. She asked follow-up questions. She remembered what you had told her, sometimes from years before, and would return to it unprompted, genuinely curious about how things had developed. Last night she asked about my daughter Sev, who has been struggling with her examinations. I mentioned Sev's situation to Elena. I believe it was during a lunch, perhaps 8 months ago, perhaps more, in passing, as a brief explanation for why I seemed distracted. I did not expect Elena to remember. She not only remembered but asked, last night, specifically, had Sev found the tutoring arrangement useful? Had the anxiety improved? Was she sleeping better? I was moved. I told her everything. I talked about Sev for, I think, 20 minutes. Elena listened with that complete attention she has, asking just enough questions to show she was following, and I felt seen. I felt that we were finally having a real conversation, that the professional distance was dissolving, that after 9 years we were becoming genuine friends. And Elena, the whole time, knew she was leaving the next morning. She let me talk about my daughter for 20 minutes. She listened. She cared. I believe she genuinely cared. Elena is not a person who performs interest she does not feel. I have watched her in enough rooms with enough people to know that about her. She was not performing. She actually wanted to know about Sev. And then she said goodnight and gathered her coat and went back to the embassy to finish whatever remained of a departure that had been, apparently, planned for some time. I do not know what to do with this. I do not know what to do with the image of her listening to me, asking about my daughter's sleep, and knowing the entire time exactly what morning was coming. Day 12, first month. I asked one of our junior analysts today to pull the full record of formal interactions between my office and the human diplomatic mission for the last 9 years. I told him it was for the ministry's assessment process. This is partly true. He brought me 11 volumes of archive correspondence and meeting records. I have been reading through them tonight. I am looking for something, though I am not entirely sure what it is. A sign, perhaps, some indication that I missed something I should have seen. Or, perhaps the opposite, evidence that there was nothing to see, that Elena was as straightforward as I believed her to be, that her departure is simply a political decision made above her level, that the dinner was a coincidence of timing, and the gift a generous impulse. I want very badly to find that evidence. What I am finding instead is a record of professional relationship that was on Elena's side, managed with extraordinary care, and I am beginning to see extraordinary restraint. Meeting after meeting in which she raised concerns through proper channels. Objection after formal objection filed in careful language, as I always noted, never escalating, never threatening, always finding the diplomatic path through. When the Voxian government restricted human residents' access to certain transit routes, this was 6 years ago, a decision I opposed internally but was not able to stop. Elena filed a formal objection within 48 hours. The objection was precise and thorough and cited 7 specific provisions of our bilateral agreement. It was rejected, as I knew it would be, by the Ministry's Review Board. Elena acknowledged the rejection in writing and requested that the objection be placed on record. I remember how I felt when I saw that response. I felt relieved. I told a colleague that Elena was handling it well, that she was being pragmatic, that the relationship was stable. I used the word stable. I think I meant by that word that she was not making my work difficult, that she had received a bad outcome, without making it my problem. I am reading this now, and I am feeling something I do not have a precise name for. It is adjacent to shame. It is a feeling of seeing something clearly for the first time that was always visible and choose and understand it as something else. She was not being pragmatic. She was a diplomat representing people who were being harmed, filing careful formal objections that she knew would be rejected, and then absorbing those rejections without the kind of reaction that would have made her easier for me to dismiss. She was doing her job. She was doing her job with more professionalism than I gave her credit for, or rather, I gave her credit for a version of professionalism that was convenient for me to admire. I called her manageable. I said that to DAV at the Foreign Ministry, social 3 years ago. I remember the exact moment. We were standing near the beverage table, and he asked me about the human portfolio, and I said that the current ambassador was the most manageable human I had ever worked with. I meant it as a compliment. I was proud of our relationship. I thought I was praising her. She would have been mortified to hear it. I know this now in a way I did not know it then, though I think some part of me knew it then and chose not to examine it. Day 19, first month. I received a communication today from the Intergovernmental Liaison Office, which is the slow-moving body that handles disputes between the human government and Voxian Foreign Ministry. The communication confirmed that the human diplomatic mission had been formally recalled, that the recall had been under consideration for some time, and that the human government considered the current political conditions on Vox to be incompatible with continued diplomatic engagement. Incompatible. That is the word they used. I spent most of the afternoon going through our internal policy files, the decisions of the last 4 years that affected human residents of Vox, the transit restrictions, the reclassification of certain human cultural practices under our public order statutes, the new residency documentation requirements that added 14 additional forms to the renewal process and reduced the renewal window from 1 year to 4 months, the limitation on human children enrolling in standard Voxian educational institutions, the change to the healthcare access program that removed 18 categories of coverage that had previously been available to human residents. Elena had filed formal objections to every single one of these decisions. 41 formal objections in 4 years. I processed 37 of those objections personally. I forwarded them to the relevant policy bodies. I received the rejections and communicated them back to Elena in carefully worded replies that thanked her for her engagement with the process. I then filed the correspondence and moved on to the next item. 41 objections, 37 of them through my hands. And I called her manageable because she kept filing them through proper channels and accepting the outcomes without drama, because she never made me feel, personally, that anything was wrong. She was telling me the entire time, in the only language our relationship had established as acceptable, and I received each communication and filed it and felt good about the stability of our professional relationship. I am going to stop writing for tonight. I need to sit with this for a while, without words. Day 24, first month. I have been thinking about the word expert. I use it about myself, specifically in reference to my understanding of humans, on multiple occasions that I can remember, and probably on many occasions that I cannot. I use it in formal assessments. I use it in conversations with colleagues. I use it in a briefing document I prepared 2 years ago for the deputy minister when he was preparing for a multilateral conference that would include human delegates. I wrote that my 15 years managing the human portfolio had given me expertise in human diplomatic culture and communication styles that would be useful to his team. What was the basis for this claim? I had attended human cultural events at the embassy, the annual festival they hosted, the musical performances, the art exhibitions. I attended as a courtesy, and I was always glad I went, and I always felt afterward that I had glimpsed something genuinely interesting about how humans make meaning. But I attended as an observer. I did not talk to people. I stood at the edge of things and watched and felt moved, and then went home and thought, I understand them a little better now. As though understanding were something that accumulated from the outside. I had learned 12 words of their primary language. 12 words. I was proud of this. Elena spoke fluent Voxian. She had spent 3 years learning it before her posting, and she used it without any assistance in every meeting, and I always thought of this as her being professional. It did not occur to me to think of it as her doing something I had not bothered to do. I learned 12 words and called it effort. I had read 2 books about human history. I remember them. One was an overview of their early space exploration programs, which I found genuinely fascinating, and one was a cultural study written by a Voxian academic who had spent a year on the human homeworld. I read them both carefully and took notes and felt, when I finished, that I had done something rigorous. 2 books about a civilization of billions. Expertise. I want to be precise about what I am feeling, because imprecision would be a kind of continuing dishonesty. I am not simply feeling embarrassed. I am feeling the particular discomfort of someone who had been, for a long time, wrong in a way that made her comfortable, and is now required to look at the shape of that wrongness and take its full measure. I was comfortable with Elena because Elena made herself comfortable to work with. She adapted. She communicated in ways that functioned within our professional structure. She never asked me to extend myself beyond what was easy, and I interpreted her adaptation as evidence of closeness, interpreted her patience as evidence that she was satisfied, interpreted her care for me as evidence that the feeling was mutual and that I deserved it. I did not ask myself what she was adapting from. I did not ask myself what it cost. Day 31, first month. I told my daughter about Elena today. Seb is 22 now and studying diplomatic relations at the university, which means she spends a certain amount of her energy being appalled by how things actually work in the real diplomatic service. She came for dinner tonight, and I found myself telling her the whole story. The withdrawal, the dinner, the gift. She listened, which she is good at, better than I am. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Did you ever ask Ambassador Park what she actually thought about things?" I said, "We talk constantly. Hundreds of meetings over 9 years. Sev said, "That's not what I asked." I did not have an answer for her. She did not push it. She helped me clean up the dishes, and then she left. And I am sitting here now looking at the woven box and turning her question over. Did I ever ask Elena what she actually thought? About policy. Yes. I asked her regularly for the official position of the human diplomatic mission on various policy matters. I asked her what her government's priorities were. I asked her how she assessed the current state of the bilateral relationship. These are diplomatic questions. They have diplomatic answers. Did I ever ask her what she thought about living here? What it was like to be Elena Park on Vox, not the ambassador, just a person. I asked her once at one of the cultural events whether she was enjoying her posting. She said it was a remarkable place, and she was glad to be here. I took this as positive and moved on to something else. Once, in 9 years, I asked her once if she liked it here, and she gave a diplomatic answer, and I accepted the diplomatic answer because it was the answer I wanted, and I did not think to ask for more. I think about the dinner now, and I think about how I talked. I talked about my children, my work, a difficult situation with a colleague on my team. I talked about a book I was reading. I talked about a trip I was planning to take. I talked, and Elena listened, that complete particular listening of hers, and asked questions and remembered things and was warm. Did she talk about herself? I am trying to remember, and the memory is humiliatingly thin. She said something about her sister, something about a place she had visited in the eastern reaches. The light there. She mentioned a meal she had eaten recently that surprised her. Did I ask her to say more about any of these things? I did not. She was generous with attention, and I took it. I gave it back in the form of professional consideration, good working meals, timely responses to her correspondence. I thought this was reciprocity. I think now that it was not. Day 8, second month. I have started going back through the cultural events. I attended the Human Annual Festival 6 times during Elena's tenure. I have photographs from 4 of them, official photographs taken by the ministry's documentation office, the kind with careful lighting and formal arrangements. In every photograph, Elena is smiling. In every photograph, I am standing slightly apart from her in the careful way diplomats do when they want to signal warmth without formality. I remember what I felt at those events. I felt that I was making an effort, and that the effort was noticed, and that it built something. I left each one with the pleasant sensation of having understood something new, of having widened my knowledge of human culture in a way that made me better at my work. I do not think I ever once talked to a human resident at those events. I talked to Elena. I talked to the cultural attaché, a man named Parov who was always stationed near the food. I talked to 2 or 3 other members of the embassy staff who made their way to me because I was a senior Voxian official and they were doing their jobs. I did not circulate. I did not introduce myself to people. I stood in one place and let the event come to me, and then I went home and felt that I had attended. There were human residents at those events, people who lived on Vox, who worked here, whose children went to school here, people who have been affected by the transit restrictions and the documentation requirements and all the other decisions that had accumulated, one by one, into something I am only now looking at as a whole. I was standing in the same room as them 6 times. I never learned any of their names. Day 15, second month. I have been in contact with DAV, who is now posted in the Multilateral Affairs Division and has some visibility into the broader political situation. He is not able to tell me everything, but he told me enough to confirm that the human withdrawal was not a sudden decision. It had been under discussion for at least 2 years. 2 years. Elena has been carrying a gift for me for 2 years, she said. She had been waiting for the right moment. I have been sitting with the arithmetic of this for 3 days. The human government was debating withdrawal for 2 years. Elena was here for both of those years. She was here, attending our meetings, filing her formal objections, asking about my daughter, carrying a small woven box from her home city, and waiting for the right moment. I want to ask her what the right moment meant. Why that dinner? Why that night? What made it finally the right time after 2 years of waiting? I think I am beginning to understand, and I think what I understand is not flattering to me. I was never going to ask. That is what I think the right moment required. Some indication that I was ready to receive something personal, something that carried weight, something that was not part of a professional relationship. And Elena, who is more perceptive than I ever credited, was waiting for a sign that I had become the kind of person she could give it to. And at that last dinner, for some reason, the circumstances, the knowledge that it was ending something in how I was sitting or talking or looking at her, she decided it was finally close enough. She was not going to wait for perfect. Perfect was not coming. She had a flight to catch. Day 22, second month. I had a meeting today with a human representative from the Residents' Liaison Council. Her name is Pava. She is not a diplomat. She lives here, has lived here for 12 years, works in one of the research institutes in the northern quarter of the city. The ministry asked me to meet with her as part of our assessment process. She was not easy to talk to, not because she was rude or aggressive. She was not. She was precise. She said things directly and waited to see if I had understood them. She did not soften anything. She told me that the human community on Vox has been documenting the policy changes for 4 years, not just filing formal objections through diplomatic channels, but documenting the lived experience. The families who couldn't reach the hospital on the restricted transit lines, the children removed from their schools, the adults who lost jobs because they couldn't navigate the new documentation process in time. She showed me a report. It was 312 pages. I asked her if Ambassador Park had been aware of this documentation. She looked at me with an expression I could not entirely read and said, "The ambassador helped compile it." Of course she did. There's a version of me, the version from 6 months ago, who would have processed this information professionally and efficiently, noted it, used it in an assessment, filed it. The version of me sitting in that meeting room today could barely keep my face arranged properly. Elena helped compile 312 pages of documentation about the effects of decisions I had processed and filed. She did this while attending our meetings, filing her formal objections in careful language, asking about my daughter, learning the names of my children. She knew things I never knew. She was paying attention to things I was not paying attention to. She was, in the most literal sense, doing her job, representing the people she was here to represent. And I was doing something I call my job, which was, I think, managing the surface of things and calling the surface the whole. Day 29, second month. I have stopped using the word expert. I noticed I had used it recently in a briefing. I went back and removed it. I do not know what word I would use instead. I have been thinking about this. Not about the word exactly, but about what a more honest description would look like. I have been in this role for 15 years, and I have a great deal of information about the human diplomatic mission and about the procedural history of our bilateral relationship. What I did not have, and what I called expertise, was understanding. The distinction seems obvious now. It seems like something I should have known. I am a diplomat. It is literally my profession to understand the distinction between information and understanding, between the surface of a relationship and what is actually happening beneath it. I have given briefings about this distinction. I have trained junior analysts in how to read diplomatic signals that diverge from official positions. I could read it in every other context. I could not read it in this one because I did not want to, because wanting to would have required admitting that the relationship I had built my professional identity around was not what I thought it was, because Elena's warmth felt like closeness, and I chose to believe the feeling. I think there is something specific about warmth. I think warmth is a quality I did not know how to evaluate correctly, or rather, I could only evaluate it as evidence of what I wanted to be evidence of. Elena was warm to me. Elena was warm to everyone. She was warm to the junior analyst who brought her tea. She was warm to the security officer who checked her in at the ministry gates. She was warm, I have been told, to the maintenance staff at the embassy, who apparently gathered on the morning she left to see her off, which means they knew she was leaving, which means she told them or let them know or found a way to give them that, which is not something she found a way to give me. The maintenance staff knew. She said goodbye to the maintenance staff. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it as the most precise possible illustration of what I have been failing to understand. Elena did not withhold herself from me because she disliked me. She did not fail to trust me because she found me unworthy. She trusted the people she had genuine relationships with. I was not one of them because I had never tried to be, not really, not in the way that would have required me to be curious about her rather than about how she could be useful to my understanding of myself as someone who understood humans. Day 7, third month. Sev came again for dinner. She asked about my writing. I had mentioned to her that I had been keeping a journal. I did not tell her what was in it, and she has been gently checking in. I told her I was trying to understand something. She asked what. I said I was trying to understand how I could be wrong about something for 15 years and not know it. She was quiet for a moment, the way she gets when she is about to say something careful. Then she said, I think you knew it a little. I think you always knew a little, and you found a way to not look directly at it. I asked her why she thought that. She said, because you cared about it. You talked about Ambassador Park, like you cared about the relationship. People don't usually need to look away from things they don't care about. I do not know if this is comforting or makes things worse. Probably both. I have been thinking about Elena's warmth again. I have been thinking about the quality of it, because there is something I keep returning to that I do not want to let myself sentimentalize, but also do not want to dismiss, and that is, I think Elena genuinely liked me, not in the deep way I hoped, not in a way that meant trust or friendship or anything that would survive the circumstances. But I think she found me as a person worth being warm to. I think her kindness to me was real kindness, not performance. And I think I took that real kindness and mistook it for something it had never been, and never asked any questions that would have revealed the mistake, because asking would have risked discovering the answer. Safe, ignorant, comfortable, very manageable. Day 16, third month. I have been reading the 312-page report. Pava sent me a copy after our meeting. I think she sent it as a test to see if I would read it. I have been reading it at night, a section at a time. It is not an abstract document. That is the first thing I noticed. It is full of names and specific situations. A family with 2 children who lived in the district near the 4th transit restriction. The father's work was in the eastern commercial sector. The restriction was implemented without the transition period Elena's formal objection had requested. He lost his position. The documentation in the report includes his account of what happened, the correspondence with his employer, his attempts to navigate the appeals process. Elena filed a formal objection about that transit restriction. I processed the objection. I forwarded it to the Policy Review Board. I received the rejection. I sent Elena the rejection in carefully worded language that thanked her for her engagement with the process. I did not know his name. I did not know any of the names. Elena knew them. Elena knew because she was, in the most actual sense of the word, paying attention, not to what was visible and comfortable and professional, to what was real. I think about the 12 words of their language that I was proud of, and I feel not shame exactly. Shame is about you. What I feel is more outward than that. I feel the specific discomfort of having looked at a situation from the single most self-flattering angle available for 15 years and called the angle the full picture. Day 24, 3rd month. I have been writing to Elena. I have not sent any of it. I keep starting and stopping because I cannot find the right tone. Everything I write sounds either defensive or performatively self-abasing, and both of those are, I think, versions of the same error. Still making about myself, still center my own experience of being wrong rather than what my being wrong actually meant. What I want to say to her is, I think I understand something now. I want to say, I think the gift was a kind of conclusion. I want to ask her, was I difficult? I mean, really, honestly difficult. Not in the ways that get noted in formal records, but in the quieter way of someone who kept not quite seeing you and kept acting as if they had. I think the answer is yes. I think I was exactly that kind of difficult, the kind that doesn't know it's being difficult because the difficulty is invisible from its own angle. I do not know if I will ever send anything to her. I do not even know if there is an address I could send it to. Interstellar communications between Vox and human space are routed through the intergovernmental bodies now, which means they are slow and official and would arrive on her desk as a piece of formal correspondence, which is, now that I think about it, exactly the kind of communication we have spent 9 years producing together, and exactly the kind I am trying to move past. There probably is not a way to move past it from this side. I think the only thing I can do from this side is stay with what I have learned and try not to let it calcify into a lesson that becomes easy to carry. Day 3, 4th month. I have started doing something I should have done much earlier in my career. I have been meeting with human residents, not in a formal capacity, not as part of any assessment or policy review. Pava helped me make some introductions. I have been having lunch with people, asking them to tell me about their lives here, listening. I am careful not to call it research. It is not research. Research is when you are gathering information to use for something else. This is just sitting with people and asking them questions and finding out what they say. I am not good at it yet. I have spent so many years in the diplomatic register that shifting out of it requires constant attention. I catch myself asking questions that are really ways of steering toward information I want, rather than genuine openings. I catch myself preparing my next thought while someone is still talking. I am trying. I think trying is different from what I was doing before, which was performing an approximation of effort and calling it the real thing. A woman named Sora, who has been here for 20 years and runs a small botanical research station in the city's Green District, told me something last week that I have been carrying around. I asked her what she thought Voxian people generally misunderstood about humans. She thought about it for a long time before answering. She said, "You think we are more resilient than we are. You see us adapting and you think, they are fine, they are hardy, but adapting to something is not the same as being all right with it. It just means we are still here." I wrote that down when I got back to my office. I wrote it on a small card, and I put it on my desk next to the woven box. Adapting to something is not the same as being all right with it. It just means we are still here. Elena filed 41 formal objections. She compiled 312 pages of documentation. She was still here, still professional, still warm, still asking about my daughter. And I looked at all of this and saw, she is adapting. She is fine. She is manageable. Day 11, 4th month. I have been thinking about the question of why she told me at dinner. Why that night? Why she decided, finally, after 2 years of carrying the gift, that the time had come. I have a theory that I am not sure I want to be true. I think she had decided by that point that I was not going to change. Not in an essential way. Not in the way that would have made the relationship something different from what it was. She had been waiting for some sign that I was genuinely curious about her, about the people she represented, about the gap between what I thought I understood and what was actually true. And after 9 years and 41 formal objections and 6 cultural festivals and hundreds of meetings, she had concluded that the sign was not coming. I think the gift was a farewell that was also a kind of grace. She could have left without it. She could have left without dinner, without 3 hours of warm conversation, without asking about Sev's sleep or laughing at the small jokes I made. She could have followed the withdrawal protocol and left me a formal letter from the Intergovernmental Liaison Office. Instead, she gave me an evening. Why? I do not think it was because she owed me one. I do not think it was because she felt guilty about leaving without notice. She had filed enough formal objections to know that what was happening was not her fault. And whatever Elena Park was, she was not someone who confused institutional decisions with personal culpability. I think she gave me that evening because she genuinely liked me, in the limited way she had always genuinely liked me, and because she is the kind of person who gives what she can give even when the terms are imperfect. She could not give me 9 years of trust one had not earned. She could give me 3 hours of her honest warmth in a box she had been carrying from home. Day 19, 4th month. Sev asked me today if I would do anything differently. I said I would have asked her more questions. Real questions. Earlier, Sev said, "What stopped you?" I thought about it for a long time. The honest answer is that I did not think I needed to. I thought I already knew. I had attended their events and read my 2 books and learned my 12 words and managed our interactions smoothly for 15 years. And the smoothness felt like evidence. I thought the smoothness was what closeness looked like, professional closeness, the kind that 2 careful diplomats build over years of working well together. I did not know, or I knew but did not look at it, that the smoothness was Elena's work, that she was the one maintaining it, absorbing the friction, finding the diplomatic path through every difficulty so that I never had to feel the full texture of what was actually happening. She did this because it was her job. She did it because she was exceptional at her job. And I let her do it and called the result a relationship. What I had was not a relationship. What I had was an extremely well-managed surface. Day 27, 4th month. The woven box is still on my desk. I have picked it up many times over these 4 months. It is well made. Whoever made it knew what they were doing. The pattern on the bottom is geometric. Small repeated shapes that, if you look at them long enough, start to seem like they might be a code for something, though probably they are just a pattern. Elena told me the name of the district where it was made. I did not write it down, and I no longer remember it. This seems like a small but accurate fact about who I was. I think I finally understand why she gave it to me at that dinner. Not because the moment was right. Not quite. The moment was never going to be right. Not in the way she might have hoped for once. I think she gave it to me at that dinner because she had decided to give it to me before she left, and that dinner was her chance. Not the right moment, but the last one. But there is something more than timing. There is also what the object meant. It was something from her home. Something handmade. Something that came from a specific place and the hands of a specific person who made it. It was personal in a way that our entire professional relationship had never been. Not because she had never offered that kind of thing, but because I had never created space to receive it. She brought what was, essentially, the most direct communication she had managed in 9 years to our working relationship. Here is something real from my life. Here is evidence that I have a home, a city, a history, a texture to my existence that is not just Ambassador Park of the human diplomatic mission. I did not ask about the maker of the box. I said it was beautiful, which it is. I did not ask about the district, the city, what her home city looked like, what it meant to her to be far from it for so long. I received the gift and felt moved and told her it was beautiful, and then I went home happy, feeling like we had finally become friends, and she went back to finish packing her things. She gave me the opening. One last time, she gave me the opening. I did not take it. I think she knew I would not. I think she gave it anyway, because that is who she is. She has spent 9 years finding ways to communicate with me across a gap that I did not know existed. She filed 41 formal objections. She attended the dinners. She asked about my children. She carried a gift from her home city for 2 years, waiting for a moment that never quite arrived. And at the last possible dinner, she handed me the gift and sat with me for 3 hours and was everything she had always been: warm, curious, funny, present, and let me have a night I wanted to have. She gave me the friendship I had always assumed we already had. For 3 hours, one night, I keep the box on my desk because I need to be reminded of what it means. It is not a souvenir. It is not a memento of our professional relationship. It is, I think, the most honest thing anyone has ever given me, and its honesty is precisely that I did not deserve it. She gave it to me anyway. That is not a lesson about me. That is a fact about who Elena Park is. I hope she is somewhere near a coast. I hope the light is good there. I hope her sister visits. I hope she is telling someone all the things she never told me, and that person is asking the right questions, and I hope they both know how lucky they are. I am going to learn more than 12 words. I am going to read more than 2 books. I am going to ask the questions I should have been asking all along, and then I am going to stop talking and listen for the answer, the real answer, the one that is not diplomatic and smooth but true. I do not know if any of this will be enough. I think probably it will not undo 15 years of convenient blindness overnight. I think becoming someone who actually sees other people is not a lesson you learn once and then have. I think it is a practice you keep doing wrong, and then less wrong, and then maybe, over years, a little less wrong than that. I am going to try. The box is on my desk. This story was brought to you by HSY Stories. Subscribe to our channel and be the first to experience every new story.